when the other side was in charge of this. It's a good bill. It's a fair rule. I urge its adoption. With that, I will yield back the balance of my time and move the previous question on the resolution.
The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on ordering the previous question will be followed by 5-minute votes on adopting the rule if ordered, and motions to suspend the rules with regard to House Resolution 568 and H.R. 5740. This will be a 15-minute vote. A 15-minute vote.
The Defense Authorization Bill authorizes $643 billion in spending and the programs and policies for the military in the coming year, in the 2013 fiscal year. The House yesterday began general debate on the bill, and they started today debating the rule for further consideration of the amendments to that authorization bill. 142 amendments are allowed for under the rule. This is a vote on the previous question. Democrat McGovern from Massachusetts looking to offer an amendment to the debate today that would deal with the U.S. presence in Afghanistan. So Democrats asking their members and others to vote against the previous question so that that amendment can be considered. 15-minute vote will be followed by a vote on the rule for the further consideration of the authorization bill, and 2 5-minute votes will follow that. For a look ahead at what will be today a long day of amendment debate and into tomorrow, we spoke earlier this morning with a Capitol Hill reporter. Frank Oliveri is with Congressional Quarterly. This defense authorization bill has some 140 amendments to be debated. What are some of the key issues that are likely to come up during that debate?
Well, there'll be some things that you'll see that we've seen over the years. You'll see Afghanistan. You'll see detention-related, detainee-related amendments that will sort of draw some attention. You'll have possible Pakistan amendments where they'll have some passionate debate about that. Obviously, there's been some issues between the United States and Pakistan. And there'll be a host of things that will go rather quickly that will have some weight. For example, freeing up commercial satellite sales, taking them off the U.S. munitions list, and things of that sort.
Even before the debate on the bill got underway, the Obama administration issued a veto threat. Why was that?
Well, there were a whole bunch of issues that the Obama administration has problems with. Of course, the House Republicans have a great deal of issues with the president's budget as proposed. So, they're kind of at a logjam here because the president has essentially issued a very blanket kind of veto saying if there's anything here that undermines my new national security policy or the Budget Control Act, that I'll just veto it. And that pretty much throws into question the entire bill as it relates to the administration.
How have the Republicans responded to the administration's concerns?
They really haven't. They're kind of going ahead. It's definitely a very political debate at this point. They're talking about dollar amounts that greatly exceed the Budget Control Act, the bipartisan Budget Control Act, and they are sort of just pushing aside the sequester and not really addressing those issues. As you notice in the earlier debate on the Ryan budget proposal, most of the cuts have been shifted on the Ryan budget to the domestic side, and defense has been largely held harmless. Lawmakers on the House Armed Services Committee have in fact added a number of different items to the, organic to the bill that would be at a significant amount of cost over the next 5 to 10 years.
Some of those things that the committee added, the military, Pentagon officials have not requested. What have we heard from the Pentagon on these new additions to the authorization bill?
Well, the President and the Office of Management and Budget in their SAP statement, their Statement of Administration Policy, essentially outlined the missile defense site on the East Coast as something that they cannot accept. There are additional facilities related to the nuclear infrastructure in the United States, one that would help to produce nuclear triggers. That was added into the bill that would add billions of dollars over the lifetime. Those are the types of items that the administration simply sees as unacceptable.
Are there some policy issues that are likely to bring some key debate, some heated debate on the floor in the next couple of days?
I think you'll see some debate on detention that could be resolved pretty quickly because Republicans simply will oppose it. What it would do is would expose prisoners, terror suspects who are taken in the United States to U.S. federal courts rather than just military commissions. Democrats would prefer to see Article III federal courts used more often in prosecuting terror suspects. There's a long history of terror suspects being prosecuted in federal courts, but the Republicans have been blocking this. At the core of this is concerns about Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, the detention facility there. Republicans want to leave that open. If you start to run a lot of these people into the federal court systems, the president might be able to close that facility more quickly. Republicans want to leave it open.
More broadly, what does the overall bill say about the Republicans, House Republicans' vision of the military next year?
Well, I think the vision from the Republican perspective is that Defense Department has provided a significant amount of cuts, deficit reductions, I should say, proposals over the next 10 years. And they feel as though the burden should not just be on defense. Defense represents about 20% of the budget, about 40% of discretionary budget, yet they are concerned that it could face an even bigger cut than the roughly $490 billion that was committed under the BCA.
Frank Oliveris with Congressional Quarterly. You can read more at CQ.com. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And that amendment debate is still ahead. First, though, a series of votes to get through. This is the previous question vote as Democrats seek to bring forth an amendment dealing with U.S. troops in Afghanistan. A vote on the rule for the defense authorization bill is next. 142 amendments will be considered. One of those, Barbara Lee of California, will offer an amendment to end the war in Afghanistan. Her office sending out a release saying that amendment is expected to begin. They say it's expected to begin debate on that at about 3:15 Eastern. Again, the rule will provide for debate on 142 amendments, and they won't complete work on that today. Over in the Senate, meanwhile, the Senate had been working on a bill that would provide new sanctions, new economic sanctions on Iran's oil sector, but Republicans said today they needed more time to examine a revised package that the Democrats had introduced. The Reuters reports that move drew anger from Senate Democrats who had expected a unanimous Senate vote ahead of Iran talks on May 23rd. On the floor of the Senate earlier, Democratic leader Harry Reid said, quote, "I feel like I've been jerked around." There will be a vote in this series of votes coming up, a House resolution that deals with Iran. This is a sense of the House regarding the presence of nuclear weapons in Iran, nuclear weapon capability in Iran. That'll be the third vote in this series. Well, John Boehner at his briefing today focused largely on the debt talks and the fallout from the so-called Hoagie Summit at the White House. He said it's are talking again about the debt ceiling, calling the debt and deficit, quote, a wet blanket over the U.S. economy. His briefing is about 15 minutes, and we'll show you as much of it as we can during the remainder of this vote.
Morning, everyone. You know, too many Americans are still out of work and they're hurting. And they're continuing to ask the question, where are the jobs? Many are wondering what their leaders from Washington are really doing. And here in the plan, here in the House, our plan to help America's job creators continues to be our focus. We've passed more than 30 bills and sent them over to the Senate, all of which would help get our economy moving again and put more Americans back to work. Now, we all know that America faces more challenges in the coming months. The largest tax hike in American history is scheduled for the end of this year. So our defense cuts that President Obama, the Secretary of Defense, has said will hollow out America's armed services. And our out-of-control spending will force Washington to act on raising the debt limit or face a disastrous default. Listen, America has faced tough challenges before, and every time we've been able to meet them. Now, we can do it again, but it'll take a president willing to lead or at least show up. Earlier this week, I raised these issues in a little speech that some of you may have heard about. I said that we should not wait until the 11th hour to address these issues. And the only ones who are talking about drama or brinksmanship are my Democrat colleagues across the aisle. The reality is that the danger of a downgrade comes from continued inaction on the deficit and our piling debt, not for calls for action. We can use the debt limit debate to force Washington to act, to cut spending, and enact some of the real reforms that will help put America on a path to prosperity. Listen, this is all about jobs. Our debt and our deficit act as a wet blanket over our economy, causing employers and investors to wonder about, is Washington going to act? The sooner that we deal, honestly, with our long-term debt and our budget deficit, the sooner the skies begin to clear, more certainty comes so that American employers can do what they do best, put Americans to work. We can replace irresponsible defense cuts with smarter, better ways to save taxpayer money. And we can cut spending and reform our entitlement programs to ensure that they'll be there for future generations. The House is acting. The House is leading. Now we need a president that will show up. The balanced approach that the budget that the White House wants to talk about got 0 votes in the United States Senate yesterday. Got 0 votes in the House several months ago. The White House wants to raise the debt limit without a single dime of spending cuts or reforms. Listen, with nearly $16 trillion in debt already, it's just not, it's not credible. America deserves a better economic future. America can't wait, and we need a president who will show up and work with us, both Democrats and Republicans, to address these pressing concerns.
Speaker Boehner. Speaker Boehner.
Andrew.
Speaker, in that speech you said you're the most transparent guy around, so if you could keep that in mind in response to this question.
Yes, sir.
You said you wanted spending cuts and budget reforms as a condition of the debt limit. Could those budget reforms include a revenue component that would have new revenue as scored on a so-called static basis, as opposed to just what would come from the growth through tax reform?
We all know what the menu of possibilities are, from reforms to reductions to changes to save the entitlement programs, tax reform that will bring us real economic growth and quite likely a more efficient tax system. We all know what the menu is. And frankly, President and I had a pretty productive talk. Never got to where we wanted to get, but we all know this is coming. And it struck me as somewhat comical here over the last couple of days that people are looking at me like I'm the guy carrying a sword around town and going to bludgeon someone. All I'm suggesting is it's time for us to talk about this. We know when we get to the end of the year we're going to have to deal with it. So why are we going to wait?
Speaker Boehner, do you yourself think it's appropriate for outside groups to make political advertisements invoking the Reverend Jeremiah Wright?
Well, listen, this election is going to be about the economy. The President's economic policies have failed, can't run on his record, but the election is going to be about the economy. I don't know what these other people do or why they do it. All I know is that the American people vote with their wallets.
Senator McCain said it was not appropriate to use Jeremiah Wright back in 2008. Do you think it's appropriate for outside groups to use
Listen, the
Jeremiah
campaign is going to be about economics. It's going to be about jobs, as it should be.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
You and other Republicans have taken to mentioning the GSA a lot and other examples of waste to show the need to cut back on domestic spending. And yet, in your appropriate bills, you're looking at plussing up defense over last year's spending level and protecting it from cuts or schedule under BCA. Does that so they can spend more time chasing prostitutes in places like Cartagena?
A lot of budget decisions need to get made. The House has its priorities. The Senate may have their priorities. The White House may have others. But the process here is a serious one, and we're going to continue to proceed to do our work and continue to hope that our colleagues across the Capitol will do theirs.
Now that the Violence Against Women Act has passed in the House and the Senate, how do you reconcile these two bills? Is this going to turn into a fight over gay rights?
Well, we're eager to resolve our differences between the House and Senate on the issue of domestic violence. This is an important issue for our country, and it needs to be resolved. I think the bigger question is whether Senator Schumer and his Democrat allies in the Senate want to come to an agreement on this bill, or whether they want to continue to attempt to use it as a political weapon in this year's election cycle.
You said in the past that you can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again with the president talking about the debt and deficit. Do you think, has the dynamic changed? Do you see renewed hope to talk about with the president?
I live for hope. I said it this morning. I'm an optimist. You know, I was born with a glass half full. I get up every morning thinking it's possible. If I didn't, I sure couldn't do this job. But I don't underestimate the difficulty in coming to an agreement. But let's be honest. We know the end of the year is coming, and we know what's going to happen. And if we don't use this opportunity to increase the debt limit and make real changes in how we spend the American people's money, we're missing a golden opportunity.
You want to be out in front of this issue because everybody knows what's going to happen at the end of the year. But realistically, do you see a scenario where you could possibly vote on this, again, getting in front of the game here before the election, making your members take a tough vote on the debt ceiling, regardless of whether there are requisite cuts to go along with it, just to be ahead of the game so we don't engage in the so-called drinking?
Well, don't worry, I'm not underestimating the difficulty. All I'm suggesting is that the conversations could start. We could get our arms around this problem. It's not like our debt problem is going to go away. And when the president told me yesterday that he wanted a clean increase in the debt limit, it almost took my breath away. We had this debate last year. I reminded the president that when we put that idea on the floor of the House, it got about 20 votes and over 400 members against it. The problem is the debt. The problem is the spending. Washington keeps kicking his can down the road, just like our friends across the Atlantic. And look at where they are. We have time to act. Why don't we act on our own?
But are you willing to a tough vote like that prior to the election in October into September?
I think the sooner we deal with this problem, the better off we'll all be.
Back on the Violence Against Women Act, when do you expect to appoint conferees, and can you commit to getting a bill before the election?
Well, I don't know what the process is at this point. The Senate's passed a bill, but haven't sent it over because it has a blue slip problem. Our bill's over there. It'll be up, I think, to the Senate to request a conference.
So you don't have plans or people in mind?
Oh, I have people in mind. I have people in mind. But my point is we're not at that point in the process yet. But we are eager to resolve the differences between the House and Senate passed versions.
Mr. Speaker, on the debt ceiling, Leader Pelosi called the prospects of having a fight over the debt ceiling right now immature and irresponsible. How much does you bringing up the debt ceiling and drawing your line in the sand now have to do with concerns among your rank and file that your party's gotten off message with violence against women and things like the student loan fight?
Listen, the issue is the debt. It's not about me calling for us to deal with it. It's not about me suggesting that if we're going to increase the debt ceiling, that the cuts and reforms have to be larger than the increase. Remember, it's the debt. $1.3 trillion more this year, $16 trillion already. My point is I'm trying to make sure that people understand we are not going to kick the can down the road one more time. Now, why is this so important? It's not just important to save the future for our kids and our grandkids. It's really important to show job creators around America that Washington's willing to act on this big debt problem. It really is like a wet blanket hanging over our economy.
Mr. Speaker, what do you think of the fact that Eleanor Holmes Norton, the district delegate, has been refused permission to testify before a House committee today dealing with a law restricting abortions to 20 weeks in the District of Columbia? She is the district delegate. They won't let her testify. Any comment?
I'm not familiar with the testimony or the hearing, so it'd be hard for me to comment.
Mr. Speaker, we're told that Harry Reid said in response to what you and the President said that the debt limit debate should not be discussed until after the tax cuts are dealt with and after the sequester is in place next year. What's your response to that, and do you see these issues as related and part of a big deal that would have to come all together?
Well, they are clearly related. It would be nice to do them in some logical order and with enough time for members and the American people to understand exactly what it is we're doing. The idea that we're going to deal with all of this, the debt ceiling, these drastic cuts to the military, and the largest tax increase in American history scheduled for the first of the year, to think that we're going to do all of this between Election Day and Christmas is a big stretch in my mind.
Thank you.
John Boehner's briefing from earlier today. We also covered Democratic Leader Pelosi's weekly briefing, and we will show that to you later in our schedule. You can also find it in our video library at cspan.org. On the House floor, the first of 4 votes here. This is the previous question vote, as Democrats are seeking to change the legislation that's being considered today, the Defense Authorization Bill. The Democrats are looking to add an amendment dealing with U.S. troops in Afghanistan. This has been a 15-minute vote. A vote on the rule for the defense debate is coming up next, at least the debate over the amendments, 142 amendments, and 2 more votes will follow that. The Defense Authorization Bill authorizes spending of $643 billion. That's 60% of all federal discretionary spending in 2013. The proposed legislation on the House floor today is $8 billion more than the cap that was set in last year's Budget Control Act, and it's $3.6 billion more than the request by the administration.
On this vote, the yeas are 235 and the nays are 182. The previous question is ordered.
Mr. Smith of New Jersey votes aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 236 and the nays are 182. The previous question is ordered. The House will come to order. The House will be in order. The House will come to order. The House will come to order. The Chair would ask all present to rise for the purpose of a moment of silence. The Chair asks that the House now observe a moment of silence in remembrance of our brave men and women in uniform who have given their lives in the service of our nation in Iraq and Afghanistan, and for all of their families, and of all of those who serve in our armed forces, and for their families as well. Without objection, 5-minute voting will continue. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor vote aye. Opposed say no. To the Chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on that I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
This is the vote on the rule for consideration of the amendments for the Defense Authorization Bill for fiscal year 2013. At general debate yesterday, 142 amendments allowed under the rule. The amendments will be debated for 10 minutes each under the rule, except for one, the amendment by Barbara Lee of California on Afghanistan withdrawal. That'll get a debate of 20 minutes, and her office has sent out a release that they expect that amendment to be debated on the floor at about 3:15 Eastern. This is a 5-minute vote. A debate on the vote on the rule for debate over the 142 amendments to the authorization bill. A preview of what's ahead from a Capitol Hill reporter. Frank Oliveri is with Congressional Quarterly. This defense authorization bill has some 140 amendments to be debated. What are some of the key issues that are likely to come up during that debate?
Well, there'll be some things that you'll see that we've seen over the years. You'll see Afghanistan, you'll see detention-related, detainee-related amendments that will sort of draw some attention. You'll have possible Pakistan amendments where they'll have some passionate debate about that. Obviously, there's been some issues between the United States and Pakistan. And there'll be a host of things that will go rather quickly that will have some weight. For example, freeing up commercial satellite sales, taking them off the U.S. munitions list, and things of that sort.
Even before the debate on the bill got underway, the Obama administration issued a veto threat. Why was that?
Well, there were a whole bunch of issues that the Obama administration has problems with. Of course, the House Republicans have a great deal of issues with the president's budget as proposed. So, you know, they're kind of at a logjam here because the president has essentially issued a very blanket kind of veto saying if there's anything here that undermines my new national security policy or the Budget Control Act, that I'll just veto it. And that pretty much throws into question the entire bill as it relates to the administration.
How have the Republicans responded to the administration's concerns?
They really haven't. They're kind of going ahead. It's definitely a very political debate at this point. They're talking about dollar amounts that greatly exceed the Budget Control Act, the bipartisan Budget Control Act, and they are sort of just pushing aside the sequester and not really addressing those issues. As you notice in the earlier debate on the Ryan budget proposal, most of the cuts have been shifted on the Ryan budget to the domestic side, and defense has been largely held harmless. Lawmakers on the House Armed Services Committee have in fact added a number of different items to the, organic to the bill that would be adding a significant amount of costs over the next 5 to 10 years.
Some of those things that the committee added, the military, Pentagon officials have not requested. What have we heard from the Pentagon on these new additions to the authorization bill?
Well, the President and the Office of Management and Budget in their SAP statement, their Statement of Administration Policy, essentially outlined the missile defense site on the East Coast as something that they cannot accept. There are additional facilities related to the nuclear infrastructure in the United States, one that would help to produce nuclear triggers. That was added into the bill that would add billions of dollars over the lifetime. Those are the types of items that the administration simply sees as unacceptable.
Are there some policy issues that are likely to bring some key debate, some heated debate on the floor in the next couple of days?
I think you'll see some debate on detention that could be resolved pretty quickly because Republicans simply will oppose it. What it would do is would expose prisoners, terror suspects who are taken in the United States to U.S. federal courts rather than just military commissions. Democrats would prefer to see Article III federal courts used more often in prosecuting terror suspects. There's a long history of terror suspects being prosecuted in federal courts, but the Republicans have been blocking this. At the core of this is concerns about Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, the detention facility there. Republicans want to leave that open. If you start to run a lot of these people into the federal court systems, the president might be able to close that facility more quickly. Republicans want to leave it open.
More broadly, what does the overall bill say about the Republicans, House Republicans' vision of the military next year?
Well, I think the vision from the Republican perspective is that Defense Department has provided a significant amount of cuts, deficit reductions, I should say, proposals over the next 10 years. And they feel as though the burden should not just be on defense. Defense represents about 20% of the budget, about 40% of the discretionary budget, yet they are concerned that it could face an even bigger cut than the roughly $490 billion that was committed under the BCA.
Frank Olivares with Congressional Quarterly. You can read more at CQ.com. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
On this vote, the yeas are 244, the nays are 178. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentlewoman from Florida. Ms. Ross-Lighton is to suspend the rules and agreed HRES 568 as amended, on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 568, resolution expressing the sense of the House of Representatives regarding the importance of preventing the government of Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapons capability.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to the resolution as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
The House approves the rule for debate on the amendments to the Defense Authorization Bill, so amendment debate much of the day today and well into tomorrow on the House floor. This is a vote on a bill sponsored by the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ileana Ross-Layton, and Representative Ross-Layton of Florida, with a resolution expressing the sense of the House of Representatives regarding the importance of preventing the government of Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapons capability. The Senate was dealing with Iran this morning. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid came to the floor seeking unanimous consent on an Iran sanctions bill, but Republicans objected, saying they hadn't had enough time to read the measure and there wasn't a sufficient threat of a military response. The Majority Leader Harry Reid saying after that, quote, "I feel I've been jerked around," but Senate Republican Leader Mitch McConnell said his staff did not receive a draft of the bill until late on Wednesday night and needed more time to review it. The Senate is in today. You can follow coverage on our companion network, C-SPAN 2.
On this vote,
Mr. Meehan. Mr. Meehan votes aye. Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall voted aye. Mr. Olver. Mr. Olver votes no.
on this vote, the yeas are 401, the nays are 11, and there are 9 present. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentlewoman from Illinois, Mrs. Biggert, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5740, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5740, a bill to extend the National Flood Insurance Program and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
It's the last vote in this series, extending the National Flood Insurance Program. In the previous vote, the House overwhelmingly approved a sense of the House resolution expressing the sense regarding the importance of preventing the government of Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapons capability. The Senate today, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid sought unanimous consent on an Iran sanctions bill, but Republicans objected, saying they hadn't had enough time to read the measure. All of this ahead of next week's meetings in Baghdad, the so-called P5+1 talks about Iran, and that it gets underway next Wednesday. The NATO talks get underway Sunday and Monday in Chicago. President Obama preparing for those talks, and he'll be meeting with some world leaders at Camp David tomorrow and Saturday. His national security advisor, Tom Donilon, is briefing reporters at this hour. That's live, as a matter of fact, on our companion network, C-SPAN 3. You can follow it on cspan.org and see it later in our video library there. Ahead on the House floor, 142 amendments to be considered to the 2013 Defense Authorization Bill.
vote, the yeas are 402, the nays are 18. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The chair lays before the House an enrolled bill.
H.R. 4967, an act to prevent the termination of the temporary office of bankruptcy judges in certain judicial districts.
Not just yet.
Come on, Jeff. Yeah.
I'll prepare to be guided. I'm ready, just so you know. I gotta wait for them. I'm looking.
The House in a bit of a holding pattern here. Yesterday they began a general debate on the defense authorization bill. Just a short while ago, they approved the rule for debate on 142 amendments to the bill. That debate will take up all of today and much of tomorrow, but is yet to get underway. The bill itself authorizes nearly $643 billion for defense programs in fiscal year 2013. That's $3.6 billion more than the president requested. It's $8 billion above the cap that was set, the defense cap set in the discussion over last year's Budget Control Act. The measure also authorizes $6 billion to purchase 29 F-35 Joint Strike Fighters. It also requires the establishment of a new missile interceptor facility on the East Coast that the Pentagon does not want, and prohibits Afghan forces from guarding U.S. facilities. Among the amendments and the policy issues you'll hear debated today and tomorrow as well. An amendment by Barbara Lee of California will get the longest debate. Each of the amendments gets 10 minutes of debate. Hers will get 20 minutes. It's an amendment of withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan. Her office, a short while ago, earlier this afternoon anyway, sent out a release that they expected that to come up at about 3:15 Eastern.
Purpose of the gentleman from California seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 4130.
Without objection, so